Hello, everyone. The three of us are live again. Greg Ladky, Mike Singer, and Tim Hyde of blueandgold.com. Plenty to discuss tonight. First, a quick apology for me up at the top. That was, I think, my fault that we weren't on at 7:30. A little trouble with the eCam software, but we're back at it now, 10 minutes late, but we got plenty to talk about, like I said. Mike and Tim, let's start with the college football playoff rankings, the update. Tim, Notre Dame at number 6, Oklahoma State now 5. Initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it looked like they just copied the AP poll, even at the bottom of the, 20 through 25 and things of that nature. I don't have the AP poll in front of me, but just some of the teams, SEC heavy at the bottom of the poll. Notre Dame flops to 6. It's ridiculous. I mean, where do you want me to go? I mean, the Big 12, this love affair with them, all of a sudden, I mean, the Big 12 has been pushed out for years outside of Oklahoma. Now, all of a sudden, Baylor at 10 wins, yet 2 of them are 1AA wins, or a top 10 football team, and they don't even have a quarterback. They're playing with their backup. So, it is what it is. I think everyone expected this. I did a deep dive into like wins, Power 5 wins, all of those things. And Notre Dame's up there with the top 2 or 3 in America. So they're just not getting a little push. All these teams with the 1AAs are getting credited for things. It's a little annoying. And lastly, I think a telltale for Notre Dame is where is Wisconsin? So you're telling me Wisconsin basically drops out of the top from in the 15 to completely out of the poll?
Yes, they were number 14.
Exactly. So they dropped 11. I mean, 15 plus spots just gone. 11, yep. 12, whatever, so gone. Just completely out. That's the first thing. And I noticed that in the AP poll and the coaches poll. Yet A&M loses to LSU, and A&M's 8-4. So everyone's obviously they got the 1 win, but they just got 4 losses. What's Arkansas done to warrant this top 25 ranking every week? And for the life of me, just real quick before we move on, is Purdue. How does Purdue, with 2 top 5 wins this year, get no mention? Yeah. No mention for the last month. And who are their losses to? Notre Dame and Michigan and Ohio State. So they have 4 losses. 3 of them are to 3 in the top 7. Yet they're not getting any credit for their wins that they've had this year. So, I don't know. I don't want to go conspiracy mold here, X-Files and things of that nature. But it's kind of ridiculous that some of these teams are ranked and some that have a strong resume are not. So.
Well, let's launch this very crude graphic I made.
Great.
I just want this. When I made this, I had a template for it after last week. This looked more attractive for Notre Dame, and now we just referenced Oklahoma State has those wins over number 9 Baylor and number 12 Oklahoma, and Notre Dame doesn't have a win over a ranked team at all. The only thing, and Tim, you and I talked about this previously, that Notre Dame could point to, and what you were just referencing is the FCS opponent that Oklahoma State had versus Notre Dame starting at Florida State is like the only discrepancy, if I'm Notre Dame, I'm really, really pointing to. Otherwise, it looks like the committee took a big leap this week towards, hey, they think Oklahoma State's got the tougher schedule.
Well, real quick, Greg, is just Power 5 wins. I mean, Notre Dame's got more Power 5 wins. So how do you compare these schedules? How does that committee sit there and say Oklahoma State, schedule-wise, record-wise, has played a tougher schedule than Notre Dame? It makes no sense. Notre Dame, you go off of this, sure, they ended with Georgia Tech, Stanford, not good football. But Virginia's going to a bowl. Carolina's going to a bowl. Va Tech, Cincinnati's going to go to the playoff. Wisconsin, Purdue. Toledo is going to a bowl. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame will play more bowl teams than Oklahoma State this year. More bowl teams than Baylor. If Baylor, say, wins and jumps them, they want to put a conference champion in. So, and you said it great, Greg, the other night after our show against Stanford, that Oklahoma State did not play a Power 5 team until week 4.
Yeah.
Week 4. By then, Notre Dame had already played Florida State, Purdue, and we're getting ready to play Wisconsin before Oklahoma State plays a Power 5 team.
Yeah, I think I had a typo on. I think Tulsa's 6-5, by the way, if I'm not mistaken. But still, Mike, you were about to say anything. Something.
All right. I love you guys. but it really doesn't matter who's 5 and who's 6. I mean, if Oklahoma State beats Baylor,
Yeah.
whether they're 5 or 6, they're going to jump. If they were 6 right now and Notre Dame's 5, they would jump Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So 5 or 6 right now, I get it from a like just looking at from this week. If it's a travesty that Oklahoma State gets ranked over Notre Dame, I get that. But in the grand scheme of it, it doesn't matter. It's like the whole Michigan State debate a few weeks back when, Michigan was ranked over Michigan State when the Spartans had just beat the Wolverines. But that was so long ago. And I was like, guys, why are we freaking out about this when it's going to work itself out? And it obviously has. This one will be very darn clear. If Oklahoma State beats Baylor for a second time this season, I would say that their resume is stronger than Notre Dame's. Am I crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy.
You're not crazy. It's just frustrating. Like the perception out there is Notre Dame's played no one. That's the thing, and they have played people. They have played. They haven't played some of the patsies. I mean, are we counting Kansas, by the way, as a Power 5 win? So
I feel like there's a good. I think there's a big part of the Big 12 that shouldn't be counted all that great, but I'm a naysayer on the Big 12.
And then you want to talk about the wins. As we all know, these schedules are so set so far years ago and things. I mean, for crying out loud, they're playing Florida in 2030.
Yeah.
They've already announced that. So these schedules are what they are. But no, it's just a little frustrating. And you always got to go the loss. Who has the best loss? Mm-hmm. Notre Dame's is going to the playoffs. Oklahoma State lost to a 5-loss, Iowa State.
7-5.
Alabama lost to an unranked at the time of the game Texas A&M. So, it is what it is.
And then Oklahoma State might beat a 3-loss Baylor team. Well, 2 of those losses are from Oklahoma State. So, I mean,
exactly.
That's funny.
What do you think? Did you think the committee will go back and watch this game closely, the Notre Dame Cincinnati game that Joey Madigan is bringing up? I mean, I still felt my feelings were after that game that the better team won. It's just now I'd love to see those two teams play again, Notre Dame and Cincinnati, because I think Notre Dame is. I would expect Notre Dame to beat Cincinnati now.
True, but
that's the opportunity they had. Yeah.
Yeah, life doesn't work that way. You play when you play. You don't look back and say, "Oh, well, let's do this now." Hey, they had their shot. The turnovers, interception, the fumble by Tyree gives them a chip shot. Hey, you always got to go back to the end of the first half. The game was only 10-0 at that point, and defense lets them go at 4 plays, 80 yards, and then boom, all of a sudden it's 17-0. So. It was just a frustrating game, but that's still that early part of the Notre Dame season where they didn't know who the heck they were. We got Christmas.
Some free Sam Adams advertising. I'm having coffee. I've basically been having coffee at all hours of the day since Monday morning and night. I don't know if I'll sleep tonight.
We can still hold out hope for Notre Dame Cincinnati rematch, right?
Alabama
loses, Oklahoma State loses 3-4. Quick update. I think his name's Jerry Barta. Is that the college football committee guy?
Yep.
On Notre Dame says Kelly's absence is part of the criteria for evaluating the Fighting Irish.
Yeah. He said at the end of the show that they can take into consideration anyone that's missing from the program, whether it's a player or coach, and make a determination on whether the team is lesser for it. So, yeah, that's not great news for Notre Dame, I guess, in that regard, too. They probably should have some sort of coach named, interim or not.
Yeah, they definitely will. They definitely will by then. Let's say if chaos happens. So, hey, I want chaos. I think it would be awesome to see Notre Dame. We could all agree on that. Get Notre Dame in the Final Four and have Brian Kelly hanging out at his home in Baton Rouge eating shrimp and enjoying life, watching the team, that he bailed on. In the Final Four. That would be the football gods will, if they could speak and do that, life is good.
Yeah. Well, should we turn our attention a little bit to the bigger news with Notre Dame Nation? We are now roughly 24 hours into the reality that Brian Kelly is not going to be the coach at Notre Dame next year, and there is officially a search. Mike, your impressions, let me start with you from Jack Swarbrick's presser and just what you've been hearing, what you're hearing from Notre Dame fans. I know our poll on the loose emoji board, there's an overwhelming support for Marcus Freeman to just simply be named the head coach.
Yeah, all right. There's like 4 different things in there, so we're gonna have to go through those slowly. But we'll start with the Swarbrick press conference. This was my personal opinion. You guys tell me, Tim, did you get to watch it? I know Greg did. Did you get to watch it, Tim?
Yes,
I've watched it 3 times.
I watched it live. Yeah, I watched it live.
My personal opinion is Swarbrick seemed like relieved, kind of like I am glad for this new chapter. Like this Kelly drama situation. I don't have Kelly giving me crap anymore. Now I feel like he's kind of excited about moving forward. I did, and he didn't seem sad or upset that Brian Kelly's leaving. He was. He gave Kelly good compliments and talked about how the program's in a better shape than it's ever been. But I kind of got the sense that, I mean, when he kept saying, "I'm not surprised by this. I'm not surprised by this. Saw this coming," he seemed like a man who's ready to get that next coach. Greg, I mean, what do you think?
So I had some friends reach out to me who were actually watching the presser live, and they were surprised, and I don't agree with this. They were commenting that Jack Swarbrick looked tired and unprepared, and I just don't think Jack Swarbrick's going to be unprepared for a situation like this. I don't buy it, and so to that point, I just think that along what you're saying, Mike, that maybe he already knows the answer. Maybe it's Marcus Freeman, and he just couldn't say it this morning because when you hire a new coach, there's paperwork to do, there's some legal stuff, this, that, and the other, working out deals and stuff. And, a little surprising to me, like he went with a presser only 15, 16 hours after the news broke. I don't know, maybe just to kind of put the media at bay for a little while so he can finish up a deal that he's already had in place. What do you think, Tim?
I agree with both of what you guys said. I mean, just listening to him. I mean, he may have been tired because I think he was there early opening the door.
I could relate right now.
And then the rumor is Brian Kelly was in there for about 200 seconds, probably gave him his keys and he left. So I don't think he's tired. I think Dr. Jack's been working 24/7 since all this. I loved his thing. Like, yeah, I haven't made any comments. I mean, he's a lawyer. Let's remember he's one of the best lawyers in America, one of the top law firms before he came to ND. So the guy knows what he's saying. He is, he runs the playoff committee. I don't think if people don't know that. I mean, he is the voice when the door is closed with all those athletic directors. So he knows what he's doing. I thought he was sharp. I love what Mike just said. So correct there, where he was like, hey, he didn't ask me to counteroffer him. And you kind of felt like Jack was like, I'm not going to counteroffer him. Done.
Push him out the door, right? Like,
Exactly.
Okay, bye if you want to go. Okay.
Exactly. Because you know what? He's been playing this game. I think this even goes back to, when he met with the Eagles right after they play Alabama after the 2012 season. That's always going to be in there for, the Notre Dame fan base, remembering that. The 16 meltdown where everybody now knows he was contacting teams while they're going 4-8, trying to get the heck out of South Bend. He's had a hell of a run. He's won, obviously what he's done the last 5 years. Kudos to Brian Kelly. But even in these last 5 years, his name's constantly being mentioned. It's like, me, dude, you're on the cusp. You're so close. Why don't you put just a pinch more effort into finalizing and going after 1 or 2 more dudes every year and win the damn national title instead of complaining about a couple things. So that's just what it felt. I love what Dr. Jack's press conference was, and goodbye, Brian Kelly. I agree. What it was.
I agree, Tim. And Mike, this is your area of expertise, but I feel like Kelly's already kind of gone that extra mile with what is in his tank with recruiting. Like, I think he's escalated it, but he's just never going to be the Urban Meyer, Pete Carroll type, Nick Saban type of great recruiter.
It was May 1st of last year. I wrote a column, 10 things I've learned about my first year covering Notre Dame football recruiting. And it was a huge hit, by the way. I should have done that for year 2. But one of my points was Brian Kelly is a great recruiter when he wants to recruit. And that's just the thing. I felt the same about Clark Lee. Very good, just not a recruiting grinder. I can't remember. I've done so many radio hits and live shows. I can't remember where I've said what at this point. But a lot of times in these coaching hires, like when you have a new coach coming in, it's often the opposite of the last coach. I feel like Marcus Freeman would be the opposite of Brian Kelly. He's younger, a big time recruiter. He's a defensive coach, whereas I was told Kelly was gravitated a lot more towards the offense, especially this year. I mean, I would be excited. Kelly had a ton of experience. Marcus Freeman, not so much. And one comment that I've seen a ton about from people before we get into super chat.
And Panic Mob, thank you. He's given us 2 of them, in fact.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Panic Mob.
I'm actually losing my train of thought. So, Tim, do you have a?
Well, Tim, let me throw you something, because the topic we were talking about earlier with Jack Swarbrick and whether he already knows. He said today during the presser that he does not keep a list, like a list of guys just in case his guy leaves, meaning, in the last couple of years, he hasn't been formulating a list of potential Notre Dame coaches. And he justified that by saying every search is different. That sounds believable to me. He also said, though, that he would not answer a question directly about whether head coaching experience is required. So, I don't want to overread between the lines on Jack Swarbrick. I think he's the best athletic director in the country. He's been phenomenal for Notre Dame. But if you wanted to try to read between the lines, that would kind of point more towards, again, to me, like maybe it's going to be Marcus Freeman. It might be him pretty quickly here.
Yes, it could be. I mean, it definitely could be. I love, and I really like that, that comment that he talked about, the criteria, which is true.
Yeah.
Every hire is a new hire. You have to look at the program. And of course, Notre Dame, where they're at now compared to when Weiss got canned. It's night and day. It's night and day I went all the way back to Ara Parseghian and looked at all these hires today, trying to see who's who and trying to, wrap your head around this. I mean, this program is solid. This is like when Dan Devine left. It's a solid program ready to go. And it's up to the next guy to get it going. And then next guy's got to he's got to be a recruiter. Going back to what Mike just talked about I don't know. It drives me nuts when you think about recruiting, and it's not so much the guys you miss on. It's are you going after some of these guys? And I think Mike could speak to this really good about some of the comments where Marcus Freeman, he comes into South Bend, and it just feels like Marcus Freeman's like, why aren't we calling these guys? We're Notre Dame. And him and Han, you got to work a little hard. So work, and if Marcus Freeman real quick is the guy, if something happens, I know it's going to be everyone's, no head coaching experience, things of that nature. I'm going to stick to one point is I truly believe he's going to be an Urban Meyer clone. And when I say that, I think the dude is going to be relentless out there because his name is going to be on this program. And he wants to be successful and be remembered. I think that's just his tone about the type of person he is. He's a 5-star linebacker who played at Ohio State.
Yeah.
The guy wants to win and have success.
Jack Swarbrick did answer directly that fit at Notre Dame is the number one priority for his list of characteristics he's looking for in a head coach. And so to build off of what Tim was talking about, you hear what recruits are saying, how Marcus Freeman pitches Notre Dame, and I think Tim was saying that like he does a great job of convincing kids that they are fits for Notre Dame as opposed to Notre Dame kind of like waiting around for the fit, right?
Yeah, couple things. Let's see if I can keep my train of thought this time. One, I every time I talk about the Swarbrick presser today, maybe I'm just jaded because of Kelly denying that he's never going to take another job. And then, he does. And, 15 years ago, Nick Saban says he's not going to leave the Miami Dolphins, which that's my favorite team. And then he does. So I'm just kind of like over this crap right now. I'm still a little bit. So I'm just like, I don't buy anything these people are saying anymore. But the one thing about Freeman, I've never heard with a recruit, yeah, you know what? just didn't recruit me hard enough. Got in too
Yeah.
late. And you just don't hear that. He's relentless on the recruiting trail. These kids want to play for him, the ones who are committed, and even the guys who just met him in January. I mean, they are all on board with him. Now, I should say that, every coaching search I've ever covered, school I've covered, like anytime this happens, all of the players and all the recruits want that, interim head coach to be hired. That's just the natural, that's what keeps the continuity. But rarely I'm like, that's actually a good idea, because it's usually not. You want to go get, a big time coach. But in Freeman's case, man, I think that's a great idea to keep that continuity, because I think you have a rising superstar in the coaching ranks. He knows Notre Dame. He loves Notre Dame. You see such great results with him in recruiting. Man, I know like probably 90% of this show, we're just going to be kind of talking about Marcus Freeman for the head coach spot. And, depends who you listen to. Like, my sources feel like Freeman's got a really good chance to get hired. And then you read Pete Thamel's article today, where he basically wrote that he thinks that guys like Marcus Freeman and Tommy Reece are not going to get the job because of lack of head coaching experience. But I will say this, going back to all the, I think all the press conferences are BS. I mean, you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I felt like he was kind of leading on to like, we're going to take our time here if we need to. And we're like, this could stretch into January kind of thing. If it's like someone like Luke Fickell, right? I think it's going to be done, I think, this week. Just my kind of personal opinion, reading in between the lines and talking to sources, I think it's going to be done this week. That's just me, but I'm just not buying anything Swarbrick's saying.
Let me bounce off of that. Yeah, if this drags out, Charlie Weiss was fired and they hired Brian Kelly, I think on day 10 or 11. So, you're saying if this thing drags out, they have to announce something. They have to, or you could just kiss this class goodbye, kiss any shot that you could have Isaiah Foskey or Jared Patterson, guys of that nature coming back next year. They'll just go pro. They'll do what Jimmy Clausen and Golden Tate did after 2009, just left without even talking to the next coach. So that will be a mess. And real quick, we're talking about BSs and press conferences. How about Brian Kelly last week when the question came up about Isaiah Foskey? Are you going to talk to him, or are you going to wait like you did with Ronnie Stanley? And he says, "Oh, we're already working on the angle." And one of the things Brian Kelly talked about is this team knows who's coming back and how good we're going to be next year. And he still bailed.
I haven't ruled. I don't personally have any reason to believe that Brian Kelly, that this all evolved really quick with LSU. I'm willing to entertain the idea that he didn't know he was leaving Notre Dame a week ago.
True. I'll give you that, because money talks. Look at the contract. But at the same time,
do you guys want the hot gossip that I got today? You guys want
sure.
the hot gossip?
Get lay it to us.
Always.
All right. I just want to make sure everyone is clear.
Always.
And Greg, if you put this on Twitter, like just this snippet, like involve this part right here. This is
let me mark this down. 2338.
Fifth hand information kind of stuff. Like, I don't know how actually true this is, but this is what the people want.
Well,
so I was told, I don't have a time frame on when this happened, but LSU was talking to Brian Kelly, and Kelly was not interested. And then Kelly went to Notre Dame about some kind of improvements. And you've seen some of this on Twitter and different articles that, Brian Kelly wanted this or this done. And Notre Dame is just Notre Dame, and, they're not changing for Brian Kelly's request, especially when you go back to what I said earlier, that like, I feel like Jack Swarbrick is kind of fed up with Brian Kelly. So when Kelly got the thumbs down, I think that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And he was like, all right, LSU, like, you want to talk? So I do think it developed pretty quickly in that sense, but I think the LSU contact started a good bit of time ago. Tim, what's your reaction to hearing that? Again, I just want to make sure everyone knows, like, I'm not putting that out there as like this is definitely what happened, but people love the rumor mill, so that's
Oh well,
that's what
I mean, you go on the you go on the Twitterverse and you start reading some of the guys who follow the other programs and things of that nature. Even the newspaper reporters are starting to leak out that Brian Kelly got a call a month ago, and he just said, "No, I'm happy at Notre Dame. I'm solid." So that's been out there in some of the reporting, and then it's been reported. One of the writers in Gainesville said he actually called Florida just 2 weeks ago. It's been reported that started the process. And I think Mike's point is really true. Brady Quinn was on CBS Sports today doing an interview as an alum, just talking about Notre Dame. And he talked about, from his sources, his Brady Quinn saying Brian Kelly was just complaining about a certain couple things he wants in the, a football only type of facility. And Brady
dining
Quinn's
hall.
like,
I was one thing I saw specifically was a dining hall that Notre Dame football players will have.
Football only dining hall for the Notre Dame guys.
The South Dining Hall food is amazing. Any student would know that. I mean, the chicken patty sandwiches, man, that's what I lived off that when I was.
But real quick off that comes back to Dr. Jack today, where he's talking about we have a plan. We're raising money. We're improving things, which is true. And, anyone who's walked on Notre Dame 5 years ago, go today. It's different every 6 months on that campus.
Yeah.
So there's constantly things going on. So these little rumors where Kelly's constantly asking for things, I love, go back to Mike just 10 minutes ago where, Jack's like, yeah, I'm done. Dude, you got everything you need. You're going to the playoffs. Quit your complaining. Get another guy, go recruit a little bit harder, win the damn game, get your statue, retire. And, that's not happening now.
I'm putting Michael's comment up here. Not that I endorse that specifically, but it did remind me of another thing, because everyone's going back to like, what did Kelly say 2 weeks ago? What did he say a month ago? And like clues to any cues that he gave us. And one of the things that I think he was definitely being honest about is that I remember saying something along the lines of he's not interested. Like, having a statue isn't important to him. I think that his move to LSU proves to me that his legacy at Notre Dame is not very important to him. Because he's right there in terms of striking distance, not only in the playoffs, but a couple more players, as you mentioned, towards the top, Tim, to get. And you got a great chance to win a national championship and have a legacy. You win one national championship at Notre Dame, especially a transcending one like this would be, the first one in 30-plus years. That your legacy is solidified forever, and he just was like, whatever. So I think I don't think he cares much about his legacy, at least as it relates to Notre Dame.
Well, he cares more about a dining hall, it seems like. So there, we go with that. So I guess he wants some more chicken patties over there for the football players. But the comment, Brady Quinn, really good interview, was on YouTube. Even talked about that did he love Notre Dame? And every coach at Notre Dame's complains, wants something done. I mean, you go back to Lou Holtz, complained, wanted this, but he knew what Notre Dame was, and you roll from there. Bob Davie complained nonstop during his time, always trying to do certain things. It really wasn't until Charlie Weiss, and I think Charlie Weiss, me personally being a follower of Notre Dame, a lot of things started to change when Weiss was there. Weiss started to he got the Goog. He started to get a lot of those things built for Notre Dame that hadn't been there for a long time. So that started a little bit there. And that's when Notre Dame realized, we got to get involved in this arms race and start getting wild and crazy. And they have, and they got awesome facilities.
Yeah, Mike, to Tim's point, I think Charlie Weiss was the era where Notre Dame realized that your head coach better like recruiting or you're going to get nothing, because there were a couple Tyrone Willingham classes that were, one in specifically that was abysmal. I mean, it ranked like 50.
No linemen.
Yeah.
No linemen.
Yeah. Greg, as a Notre Dame alum, I'm curious your take on this. The whole, should Notre Dame change for this? Or should it just be Notre Dame? And that's what makes Notre Dame special, that it is different from these other schools. I mean, it's an interesting conversation. What do you think?
Are you talking about the standard of having head coach experience for your position?
No, I'm sorry. No, about catering, maybe not catering is the right word, to a dining hall. Well, that's actually kind of a funny catering a dining hall. But, having students not, or the students dorm with the Notre Dame football players. Like, I've had high profile recruits tell me that turned them off to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of Notre Dame fans would say, well, why the heck are we doing that? National championship has to be the bottom line, but to Notre Dame, it's not.
Yeah.
So do you feel like Notre Dame should be Notre Dame? I mean, should Notre Dame change? I mean, it's at least a topic of conversation, Greg.
Well, and I don't know specifically how Notre Dame handles that line of negative recruiting, but and I would imagine they do this, but you find advocates who are graduates, who are athletes that could speak to, I think, the reality that when you do room with the general student population, you are far more likely to build stronger friendships. I mean, I've got friends that play on the basketball team, more so than the football team, I'd say, but I know that those guys spent a lot of time with general students and still keep in touch with Notre Dame friends, and that their alumni or their Notre Dame network and connections are vital. Like, it's not, if you're making a decision about the next 40 years of your life, you don't want to pigeonhole yourselves to only 80 other people for your Notre Dame experience. I mean, you have an entire student body that spans not only the nation but the world in terms of where they're coming from, what their skill sets are. So I just think that you can't have it both ways. Like, yeah, they might be more comfortable their freshman and sophomore year if they're rooming with a football player, but at the same time, I think you're chipping away at what Notre Dame's really all about, especially life after college.
I should mention as well that I've had recruits tell me that they love that about Notre Dame. Brendan
Yeah.
Vernon, class of 2023 defensive lineman commit. He is all about meeting new people, getting all these experiences. And man, if that doesn't sound like a Notre Dame kid, then I don't know what does. But yeah, I have, like, parents love it because Notre Dame does sell parents and recruits on that. Like, hey, like, this kid, like, that your son's going to room with might be like run a Fortune 500 company soon. Like, that's the kind of person you want to room with instead of, the kid's going to transfer in 2 years maybe. So that's, I mean, I like it personally.
I graduated 20 years ago, and I think some of the dorms, I mean, I was in Dillon Hall, tiny little rooms, no air conditioning. I don't know how much they've improved, like, the dorm living situation for athletes. I'm sure it's better than it was 20 years ago. And I know that the athletes then, I don't recall people griping about living with the general student population too much. There was a level of appreciation there. I mean, yeah, when they move off campus and they get apartments and houses, they tend to gravitate back towards their team. But that's kind of what everyone does. Like, you end up getting an off-campus place with your best buddies, whether or not, often you didn't, room with your best buddy your freshman year. But for me, my freshman year random roommate is still one of my best, college buddies. So I was lucky in that regard. But anyway, Tim, go ahead.
No, I mean, that's the Notre Dame experience, and I think that's overplayed sometimes because, 99% of the football players are all off campus within 18 months anyway. So it's not like they're on campus forever. And
Right.
it's those freshmen guys. I mean, you see, a lot of the football players always talk about that experience. And going back to what Brian Kelly talks about, the academics. I mean, you're being roomed with a 5-star academic guy. I know my wife, her first 2 years, her roommate was daughter of an oil tycoon. So he owned oil out in the ocean down there in the Gulf of Mexico outside of Texas. So I don't want to give the company away and all that, but that's who she met. And she was from a small, suburban town outside of Boston, and meeting those people, and they're friends to this day. All kinds of stuff like that. And she was good friends with a few of the football players back then during the Bob Davie years. So that's the negative recruiting. And if a guy's going to fall into that and get suckered into that, then, the old saying is, he ain't going to survive at Notre Dame anyway. And I think Notre Dame has taken guys. I mean, just go over the Kelly classes now and look at the guys who have transferred, who have had academic probations, who have not survived at Notre Dame. I mean, you got to go to class. You got to write a term paper. You're not going to be Ohio State and have 4 years of online school and just play football and do whatever the heck you want. I mean, Notre Dame is never going to be that. And that's the stigma. That's what's out there in recruiting. But at the end of the day, Mike's in this business for recruiting. It's like, you're telling me you can't find 25 kids each and every year? that want to come to Notre Dame, play at the highest level of college football, have a legitimate shot at going pro because you're going to get trained. You're going to play big time football.
Mm-hmm.
And if something happens with you, you're going to meet a Greg Ladky. You're going to meet someone from your freshman, sophomore year that's going to last forever. Yeah, maybe not Greg, but but it's going to last, and Notre Dame will always sell that, and it's a winning formula.
I fired up a couple super chats here while we're talking. Thank you guys for doing that. Please hit like on this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel on blueandgold.com. Please seek out our free newsletter. Sign up for that. That's a great way that we can keep you updated, and it's no cost out of your wallet. Mike, I want to cue up with just this statement. How do we think Brian Kelly is going to do at LSU? And first, on the recruiting front, it's a tough world down. It's a cutthroat business recruiting in the SEC territory. And Jimmy Smith, who I interviewed today, he's the publisher of our LSU site, said that there's a lot more of the it's all about the Jimmies and the Joes and not necessarily the X's and the O's in the SEC. You better get the best talent. And he's going to be going up against Saban and whatever Oklahoma and Texas does, fighting for kids in his own state.
Dude, that crap, like he's not going to be able to recruit against Nick Saban when Nick Saban is on weekly calls with these top recruits, and Brian Kelly has talked to him, like a lot of kids when, like, for the first time when the kid commits or takes a visit, like that's just the reality of it. Or maybe Brian Kelly sends out a mass text message like to 40 different kids and the same thing. Like, I just don't feel like that's gonna fly down there. I don't love the fit for Brian Kelly. I mean, if he feels like he can't win a championship at Notre Dame, but he can at LSU, I mean, that's on you, man. Like, that, I'm not going to tell you how you should feel about that, but like, you're not going to tell me how I should feel either. And I think it's just a bad fit. And I think he looks bad in LSU colors too.
I mean, Timmy, you've been a high school coach for a long time. And to me, Brian Kelly has to be careful about how many of his current coaches he would bring to LSU anyway. I mean, I would think he has to devote a large portion of his staff at LSU to people that have significant inroads at the high schools in that state. And can he get that done by bringing guys down from South Bend? I don't think so.
I'll answer that question talking about USC. That's, I think, been one of the issues real quick with USC is all the Texans they got. Helton brought all these Texas guys in, all these Southern guys in. Mm-hmm. And then what happens? There's no connection with the Southern California recruits. And just look at all the SoCal guys all across America flourishing everywhere except for at SC. And I think that's a big thing, especially Louisiana. I remember seeing a stat about, per capita, the football players, the talent, the NFL guys that come out of there. Louisiana's loaded.
Yep.
Brian Kelly's not a great recruiter to begin with. And he's like, heck, I don't even have to leave, my office. I could just sit here and hit golf balls in the back. So, he's not going to have to leave. He's going to go to a couple gumbo fries and go from there and shake hands and have a fake Cajun talk and things of that nature. And, LSU guy, Louisiana kids want to go to LSU. So he's going to get 20 off the bat from there. And then he's going to go pick a few here and there that want to go there. But, I mean, he needs to obviously hire a few of those guys on staff, some guys with past SEC connections, especially Louisiana connections, because, those high school football in those small towns, which Louisiana has a lot of them, it's very important. Just like Texas, if you're going to coach in the Big 12, you better have some Texans on your staff.
Greg, you hit the nail on the head. Like, Mike Elston, if he goes down there, is Mike Elston recruited in the South like that? Like, Brian Kelly's a Yankee, right? I mean,
he's Boston, Reece. And he's only been a head coach in the Midwest too. Brian Kelly, think about it, he's what, Grand Valley State, which is a Michigan school, and then Cincinnati and Notre Dame,
and Central Michigan. Oh, Central
Michigan, that's right.
Yeah,
that's not saying it's a weird fit, and I mean. Jeff Quinn, like Jeff Quinn's whole thing is, hunting and stuff. Like, I don't know the hunting, like in Louis, like, is that their big thing? Like,
it is
fishing.
Big. It is big.
He is a fishing
guy.
Big
in Louisiana.
Okay. I don't even know if I've been in the state of Louisiana before, so I couldn't tell you. But it'll be a different, his kind of like his background with recruiting. It'll be a lot different. Like it's just a different world. Like Notre Dame, I believe under Brian Kelly has signed one player from the state of Mississippi, and that was Caleb Offord, the 2020 class, who is from South Haven, Mississippi, which is a Memphis, Tennessee suburb. I mean, it's gonna be a lot different. I mean, it's just a different recruiting background for Kelly. Yeah, I'm with you, Greg. He's got to. I know there's been a report he's already retained a couple of the LSU guys, so
Yeah.
I think he'll need to retain some more. Yeah, I mean, if he's bringing over like 6 or 7 Notre Dame coaches, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in Brian Kelly as a coach. I mean, I think he did a great job at Notre Dame. So I mean, that'd be my answer about part of it being a good fit at LSU is just for me. Brian Kelly's been a great coach, but yeah, if he is competent, if he gets people in his recruiting office and his strategy to be competent, that is a state that has a history of being very easy to seal up. And as Tim pointed out earlier, that's a great state for talent to seal up, and you're going to be a pretty darn good football team if you do that.
I was on an LSU show this morning. I honestly don't even know the YouTube channel I was on, but I was on a show and they asked me to, describe Brian Kelly. And I said, one word is stability. Like he can develop a culture, which LSU is going to need that. I mean, they have like federal issues down there. Like there is a lot of problems at LSU, right? I mean, you guys are chuckling, but like it's like
I know. It's true.
It's a rebuild. I mean, there's tons of talent, but like the culture, it's a rebuild. So he's going to need really good coordinators. I mean, it's going to be a grind for him. But if he's the Brian Kelly of Notre Dame in that he's going to be the same kind of recruiter, again, very good, and he can build a program. But again, he doesn't recruit actively daily. He's got to build a really good staff around him, to your point, Greg.
I bring up Nolan Sanchez's question here. I want to ask you guys, if not Freeman, okay, Notre Dame goes, or Jack Swarbrick and the Notre Dame administration goes outside of the current football program, Tim, who's your number one most likely, or if you want to do it as the number one guy you think would be best at Notre Dame?
Oh, the number one guy. Wow.
If it's not Freeman or Reece or anyone inside the program currently.
I mean, Fickell's obviously the obvious one, but I posted on the message board yesterday. People were talking about big names. Yeah, you're not going to get Saban. Dabo's waiting for Saban to leave so he could go to his alma mater. Why not call Columbus, Ohio, and see what Ryan Day wants to do? I threw that out. I mean, who knows? I'm just talking big, great coaches. This is Notre Dame. Ryan Day's got no ties to Columbus, Ohio. He's from New Hampshire. So, he's got no ties. He's an Urban Meyer guy. He's followed him. And obviously with Chip Kelly before that, that's where he got his feet wet, was with Chip. So I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, is Ryan Day more Lincoln Riley? Meaning, did Urban leave him, as Jim Harbaugh said the other day, Summers is born on third base, that comment about Ryan Day and the talent Urban Meyer left him? Is that the same with obviously Lincoln Riley, with Bob Stoops left? I think Lincoln Riley went out and got some good guys, but I just mentioned Ryan Day. I have no idea, but if you're going to shoot for the fences, I like him. I think Fickell, just because, he's an Ohio State guy. He's done some great things. He's done a heck of a job, obviously, at Cincinnati.
Yeah.
That's a great comment.
That's a great comment right there. So I'm just throwing it out there, just shooting for the fences. You want to talk about great coaches in America. So, he would have to be out there, maybe a realistic one. But, the name is Fickell, but they just did a Cincinnati guy, and Mike, Mike
worked out pretty well.
Exactly. But you always do it. You always do the opposite, and so to speak. So do you go back to Cincinnati, Ohio for the next coach? It's kind of interesting.
Mike, what do you think?
Marcus Freeman just came from Cincinnati. Mike Mickens. I mean, tons of Cincinnati guys.
Yes, I mean, the whole staff. Yeah.
We had a comment earlier. I want to find it. I mean, I'm scrolling up on our chat here, but something to the effect of Luke Fickell would go to Ohio State. Like if he takes Notre Dame job, like he would go to Ohio State.
I just scrolled right past it. I'm sorry. I have it.
He would go there if that job opens up. I mean, now we're like double speculating. We're speculating that he would get Notre Dame and speculating if he
Like
would
leave
get
right away.
Ohio State. But Freeman, on the other hand, another Ohio State grad, like he bleeds blue and gold now. And I believe that. Like, I remember doing an interview with Freeman over the summer, and he talked about, like, yeah, I mean, I considered Notre Dame in high school, and he is someone who can speak to 4 for 40 because he was a really good college linebacker,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a cup of coffee in the NFL, but then he had his injury, a career-ending injury, so he couldn't play anymore, but he had a degree, so like he can use that. Like, I really think he loves Notre Dame. I think he wants to be at Notre Dame. I think if he crushes that at Notre Dame and Ohio State, and we're doing a double speculation again, like, and that would open up. I think he'd stay at Notre Dame. Like, so I think there's value in that. Like, I think Freeman is a Notre Dame guy for sure.
One of I didn't find the exact comment you were talking about. This is not really that close, but it's about Fickell at least. One of the things that was brought up about Luke Fickell that was speculated that Notre Dame is attracted to, and it's a good discussion point, and I think it's valid, but not to a huge extent, is that he's a Catholic guy with a background with the Catholic power high schools in Ohio. I do think the Catholic High School League in Ohio has long been one of the best leagues for just generally really good, solid high school
What are
play.
some of the schools?
But just like, like the Elder, Moeller, and then up in Cleveland, St. Ed's, Ignatius, you got,
Okay.
and then the Columbus schools like,
Sure.
I'm blanking. And then you got a little bit of like Alter and Dayton is a division down,
Okay.
but a whole bunch of schools. Anyway, first off, a lot of those kids still love Ohio State. And then secondly, I don't know if there's like the depth of talent. Like, I would be careful for people to make the assumption that, like, oh, because you've got a background at Midwest Catholic high schools, that means you're going to build a really talented roster. To what Marcus Freeman, I think, has brought to Notre Dame is you got to go out to schools that you didn't think necessarily you had a pipeline to and convince kids that they are Notre Dame fits.
I personally don't think, like, whoever this coach is, like, I don't think that you change Notre Dame recruiting. Like, you have to keep being a national recruiting base. Like, that's been Notre Dame forever.
Yeah,
like, you have to. I mean, North Dakota is not a fertile Notre Dame recruiting ground, but if there is some Catholic kid in North Dakota that's just a baller, like, Notre Dame will go there. Like, I've said many, many times, I don't think this current staff, maybe past staff, I don't know what you say about this anymore. It's interim staff, I don't know, but I don't think Florida is going to be a hotbed for Notre Dame recruiting. I just don't. But they're going to pick a kid or two out of there a year. Like Georgia, you can see 4 or 5 kids a year going to there. Really strong private schools in Georgia. You see Jaden Thomas, Pace Academy, Dion Coles, the Athens Academy. Like, you see that. But Florida, it's just not as strong in that area. Berkeley Prep is one of them. Notre Dame has a commitment from there, Keon Keeley. But so yeah, it's got to continue to be a national recruiting base. I mean, Notre Dame would be silly to put all their eggs into the Ohio recruiting basket when you got Ohio State right there.
We have a poll I referenced earlier on the loose emoji board. It's not quite yet a scientific poll, but I proposed 10 names on the forum on who people would like to see as the next Notre Dame head coach. It was Marcus Freeman, Mike Elston, Luke Fickell, Matt Campbell, PJ Fleck, Dave Clawson, that's Wake Forest, Jeff Brom, Purdue, John Harbaugh with the Ravens, Tommy Reese, and Matt Rule. There's about 540 people who have voted. 537, 391. That's 72.8% for Marcus Freeman, and Luke Fickell is overwhelmingly the outside candidate that people like the most. So it'll be interesting. Obviously, Jack Swarbrick is going to decide for himself along with the help of his superiors and advisors. But at the same time, I mean, if you're listening to Notre Dame Nation, it sounds like it's going to be one of those too.
Real quick. And if it's Freeman, the reason why fans and everyone loves him, going back to the comments we had earlier, is, he's been there on campus. He's been there for a year. I think he knows the ins and outs. That's a positive. I know Bob Davie was there for a few years with Lou Holtz and knew the ins and outs, but I think Freeman's a completely different guy. I do. I think it's recruiting. I think the fans have seen him recruit. They've seen these recruits talk about him. And I think that's why he's got the love out there of why people want him, because this is a program that's winning 10 games. Get a dude who wants to recruit and go relentless out there and go finalize and get those guys. And I think the thing with Fickell is, he's an Urban Meyer guy. I love Urban Meyer. I think Urban Meyer could coach anywhere. He's except for Jacksonville Jaguars, but he's a heck of a football coach. He was there with him. The same thing, the Midwest. He's an Ohio State guy. He's used to winning. He's been around great football coaches. He's had success. His teams are tough as nails, as we saw when they visited South Bend this year, which, by the way, who put together that defense that, knocked the heck out of Notre Dame this year? Marcus Freeman did, out there relentlessly, as Mike was talking about, him and Mike Mickens out there recruiting the heck out of Ohio, getting those guys. So that's why he's the fan favorite. And if Dr. Jack's sitting back and he's looking at these other names, and Matt Rule, PJ Fleck, this gentleman right here writes Kyle Winningham. Kyle Winningham's, he's never going to leave Utah. He's only left Utah on a plane to go play somewhere else. So he's not going to go nowhere. Who are some of these names that aren't in the top 10,
Yeah.
Like Dave Aranda has been brought up, but he's just been a DC. Does he have the charisma of a Marcus Freeman out there on the recruiting trail? Dave Aranda just seems like Clark Lee to me when you hear him speak. So,
a lot of people, and I don't know if people are, I'm bringing up Notre Dame's schedule, by the way, here. With all the positive talk about Marcus Freeman, for some reason this seems to have parlayed itself into really negative talk about Tommy Reece and his performance as an offensive coordinator. I just wanted to launch Notre Dame's schedule this year here, and those are pretty big offensive numbers since the beginning of October. I know we've had some defensive touchdowns, or Notre Dame has. Your guys' thoughts on just Tommy Reece as an offensive coordinator? I think he's done a pretty darn good job, especially with a poor offensive line at the beginning of the year.
Yes, I'll jump in there first. You just go back to the beginning of the year. They had to go get a transfer quarterback because they didn't have a quarterback in the room. We talked about this all offseason, where I truly believe Tommy Reece and Brian Kelly sat back last December and we're like, are we really going to play Tyler Buckner, who's played 1 year of high school football, and Drew Pine, and that's all we have? And Brendan Clark with a blown out knee. So they had to go get someone. A ton of wide receivers who've never played, a couple minutes here and there. Austin's been hurt twice.
Yeah.
Some really good tight ends. An offensive line. Tommy Kramer was starting for the Lions on Thanksgiving at right guard. So the best rookie offensive lineman this past week in PFF was Liam Eichenberg. So you got 4 guys going there. Hey, you could say whatever people out there hemming and hawing about this Reece thing is like, the guy put together an offense, not a lot of experience, a lot of makeshift guys that have been asked for the first time in their Notre Dame career to be the guy. And they've stepped up and won 11 wins with those guys. 11 wins with Jack Cohn as a quarterback who didn't even play last year. I think it's tremendous. And they flipped the script offensively with what they want to do, who they want to be. For crying out loud, they had Joe Alt playing the 3rd tight end at Purdue. They're playing 3 tight ends in a game, and then they've just flipped it, changed everything, moved a couple of pieces around the O-line, and they're 11-1 and ranked 6th in the country. It's pretty amazing.
Mike, I'll let you finish with the final thought here. We're hitting the hour mark, and I want to congratulate both of you for not starting to slur your words simply because we're low on sleep, not because of any consumption of anything. We're hanging on. We're doing a good job, but a good question about like the how long or the longevity it takes for Notre Dame to find a replacement. I'm going to ask also with about 2022, just your thoughts on, would they lose a ton of recruits in your mind? Like just your,
if like it's not Freeman?
If it's not Freeman and they got to wait for Fickell because he's like, I'm not going to say I'm going anywhere until after the college football playoffs.
All right, so let's say they don't hire a coach before December 15th. The first day of December 17th is the final day, 3-day early signing period. Is Jack Swarbrick like the essentially the head coach who's like signing off on, well, you can like, I'm kind of the decision, like I'm going to be the recruiting a little bit. Like
Yeah.
they're not naming an interim head coach, which that's a whole different discussion on the, I've heard all sorts of rumors and theories about that, which we can or can't get into. I don't know, whatever you guys want to do, but
no. But to your point, like yeah, they'll get.
Go ahead, Greg.
They'll get Donovan Heinisch to sign if there's no coach. They'll get Joey Tonona to sign if there's no coach. But having no coach for the early signing period is a disaster.
Right. Yeah, but there's right now there's no direction. So if it's this no interim, no one's kind of in charge right now, and that stretches into 2 weeks from now, like I don't know, are they going to sign like 7 kids? Like you mentioned Tonona, I could see that. Donovan Heinisch, a Nolan Ziegler, Tyson Ford would be one. At least I've heard that, he's Notre Dame through and through. But like if I'm Tobias Merriweather, I'm the Pacific Northwest, like I'm signing to Notre Dame. I'm a wide receiver. Like Notre Dame could bring in a triple option coach for all I know. Like obviously that's a stretch, but I'm strongly and I battle with this. But I am strongly in the opinion of you got to get this done before December 15th.
Yeah, I agree too.
But also, if Fickell is the right guy and Swarbrick believes that through and through, and that's just everything he believes in, but he can't get Fickell announced before signing day, like, is that the best move for the next 10 years, even if it's going to suck for the 2022 recruiting class like Tim? Would that set them back a big deal if the 2022 class is a lot of under the radar guys and it's just kind of a small class?
Am I forgetting about this? And Panic Mom, I'm sorry, because you brought this up earlier with another super chat. Thank you again.
No idea. I don't know.
No idea.
I probably missed it. I know Tim and I mean, for both of us, when we're preparing for the live show after games, and Mike, I know you're the same way when you're doing with Tim, you'd be surprised how much we're looking down at paper or at the computer and kind of like, checking up for the play to begin. And I miss a ton of stuff between plays.
On the talking about the Stanford game?
I don't know. Maybe if he wants to drop a quick comment.
I mean, if he wants, where is this? Is this in the halls? Is this, on the phone were they scuffling and things of that nature? But
I'd like to watch.
I'll throw my 2 cents in here about the recruiting thing is, if nothing is done between now and the 15th, well, then it's obviously going to be a guy who's playing in the, playoffs, or it's an NFL coach. I mean, it don't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. He's not going to be doing background checks on, PJ Fleck until December 22nd, just to throw a name out there. I mean, no. If nothing, and something's going to come out because Notre Dame can't sign 5 guys. So you're telling me, Dr. Jack has been working his tail off for 12 years with Brian Kelly, and all of a sudden he's going to be like, we'll sign 6 diehard Notre Dame guys, and we'll play with 68 scholarship guys next year. Have fun in Columbus. And we'll go 6-6, get our heads kicked in, and go play Oregon State in the Holiday Bowl. That's not going to happen. It's just not. It's Notre Dame. They're not going to let this thing float out there and let Snead, 5-star linebacker, whoa, what's going on? Well, he's going to jump. Tuli Alamaka is going to leave. Why the heck would that guy go, all the way from, the Los Angeles Valley to South Bend, Indiana without a coach? So many of these things are going to ebb and flow and work their way out, but it's going to happen. They're not going to let this thing float around like crazy.
Yeah, Searcher Green, we're searching for what that was all about too, and it might have happened. We just didn't see it and have nothing to say, but fun to talk about it.
Players are saying Freeman cussed Kelly out at the meeting today. I wouldn't put it past anything at this point.
Yeah, who knows?
Was he there? Real quick, was Marcus Freeman there? I thought all the assistants are out on the road recruiting.
It's a good question. Jack Swarbrick was there, but that's all. That's the only person I heard was there, other than
Freeman
Kelly, as far as adults.
Michigan, Freeman was in Michigan yesterday, so he very well could be.
He probably came down.
Came back.
That's what he's saying. That happened during the meeting. Oh, I just lost my NFL draft question, but here we go. Kyron Williams can go to the NFL draft. If you're a good running back and you're a top 4 or 5 round pick, you go. And right now he's on pretty much everyone's top 100 hot boards for the NFL draft. And then Michael Mayer has one more year, whether he likes it or not. He's certainly ready to go to the NFL, but he's got it.
Michael Mayer's got one more year to be honorable mention All-American next year. So there you go.
And be just a Mackey Award semifinalist and be left off the list. All right.
Oh, life is good.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much. Everyone, again, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll probably go live again sometime. I don't know. We'll see. We'll have definitely some tape programming. Mike, a singer, I know you have something with Goolsby coming.
Goolsby. Yeah, I'll be posting it after this. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. So we had some questions about that. So make sure everyone checks that out. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you all soon.